Greetings. This is Laura Lynn Broadhurst. Thank you for inviting me to speak today. Over the rainbow, over its shining strand. Arching the sky, it sparkles on high, inviting your merry band. Fairies and elves, you'll see for yourselves, we'll travel it hand in hand. Over the rainbow, right into fairyland. Wait a minute, that's not Over the Rainbow, is it? Who could forget the words Judy Garland sings near the beginning of MGM's Oz? Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high, there's a land that I heard of once in a lullaby. Of course, these are the right lyrics for Dorothy's ballad. In fact, Oz songwriters, composer Harold Arlen and lyricist Yip Harburg, submitted their completed piano vocal manuscript of Over the Rainbow to MGM by June 29, 1938. A few weeks later, on July 18th, a copy of this manuscript was received by the U.S. Copyright Office, where the song was registered with a copyright number under the title Over the Rainbow, with Arlen and Harburg clearly recorded as authors. So, where do those first lyrics come from? It is perhaps stunning to learn that Arlen and Harburg's Over the Rainbow was preceded by another musical entity issued some 23 years earlier under this very same title. A 1915 fairy tale operetta for young singers entitled Over the Rainbow, with a 60-minute, two-act libretto by Edith Sanford Tillotson and music by Fred W. Peace. Accordingly, the Over the Rainbow operetta received its copyright number on February 23, 1915, with Tillotson and Peace indicated as authors. A crucial legal clarification should immediately be noted. Under U.S. copyright law, titles cannot be copyrighted. The Copyright Office views titles as, quote, short phrases, end quote, not intellectual property. Therefore, titles can be reused by different authors without legal permission. Nevertheless, reusing a title and/or dramatic concept can raise any number of issues such as originality, influence, borrowing, and possible plagiarism. And as it happens, the parallels between Tillotson and Peace's Over the Rainbow and Arlen and Harburg's Over the Rainbow, as well as MGM's Oz, are far too numerous and all too strong to think MGM was unaware of this operetta prior to the composition of Dorothy's ever-famous Barnyard Number. Another clarification. My talk today is indebted to a 2019 non-academic book on the MGM film, The Road to Oz, by Jay Scarfone and William Stillman, who reveal the existence of the 1915 operetta within a brief commentary, including the following observations. Quote, if Harburg did not already know the 1915 operetta, then he almost certainly became aware of it, commensurate with MGM's pre-production survey of musical fantasies comparable to its Wizard of Oz. But then as now, there were tremendous corporate safeguards mounted to deflect any liability of third-party influences. If Harburg knew of the Over the Rainbow operetta, he wasn't saying, at least not publicly, end quote. Might Harburg really have known this operetta prior to his Oz assignment? Alternatively, did someone at MGM tell him about it? If so, who might that have been, and when could this have occurred? My own research confirms that the 1915 operetta, essentially a children's musical pageant, was quite popular across the country at amateur venues like churches and elementary schools. Productions can be documented until at least 1948, although most occurred between 1915 to 1929. Fortunately, I found an extant copy of the operetta's piano vocal score at Brown University, which discloses further details about this more than likely case of borrowing. Let's take a look at the operetta's characters and plot, as shown on page 2 of this score. To highlight for now only the most obvious analogies to MGM's Oz. The story's most precocious little girl is named Dorothy, and the children travel from a darkish, neutral-toned reality to a brightly colored fantasy realm. Tillotson's plot also shows the substantial influence of the popular Oz books by L. Frank Baum, a series of some 14 novels published throughout the first 2 decades of the 20th century. For example, Tillotson's choice of Dorothy, almost without question, stems originally from Baum. Dorothy is in fact the heroine of Baum's first Oz novel, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, the 1900 book on which the famous MGM film is based. Dorothy is also the protagonist for many of Baum's Oz sequels. Additionally, the 1915 operetta prominently features a Rainbow Queen, a character surely inspired by Baum. In the fifth installment of his Oz series, The Road to Oz, published 1909, just 6 years before Tillotson's libretto, Baum introduces Polychrome, the Rainbow's daughter, a cloud fairy who, near the beginning of the book, accidentally slides off her father's rainbow to land on Earth. Polychrome also appears in 2 later books in Baum's Oz series, as well as one of Baum's non-Oz volumes. For the 1915 operetta, though, Tillotson takes Baum's rainbow imagery to an entirely new level, as we see in the score. Toward the end of a very short Act 1, Tillotson introduces a crucial, oft-repeated waltz chorus. During the penultimate number, this waltz chorus is initially played by the piano, as the stage lights come up full, unexpectedly replacing what had been a dimly lit setting with a vivid rainbow-hued scene. Next, the Rainbow Queen and her maids invite the children to their fairyland home over the rainbow. This leads to Act 1's multi-part finale, which, among other material, includes 3 vocal statements of the waltz chorus, the first of which might have sounded something like this.
In the sky, sparkles on high, inviting a merry band. Fairies and elves, you'll see for yourselves, we'll travel hand in hand. Over the rainbow, riding to fairyland.
Admittedly, Peace's musical idiom here, typical of turn-of-the-20th-century Tin Pan Alley waltz songs like After the Ball or Daisy Bell, is not at all similar to Arlen's plaintive strains for Dorothy's Kansas Ballad. But the dramatic parallels between the 1915 operetta and MGM's Oz are now inescapable. In both, a major musical statement offers a superb rhetorical plot device that propels the story forward early in the narrative, reiterates the very catchy 3-word phrase, over the rainbow, and provides a rationale to shift abruptly from the drab real world of a brief opening scene to the colorful magic land for the main body of the drama. Might the New York City-born Harburg have seen this operetta? A search of advertised productions in New York City between 1915 to 29 turned up these 7 productions. During this period, Harburg would have been in his late teens through his early 30s. But would a young Harburg, a budding lyricist of Jewish descent, enamored with first-rate literature and professional theater, really have known about an amateur children's pageant held mostly at church schools? While possible, chances seem remote. And Arlen? A cantor's son raised in Buffalo and smitten by early jazz? The odds the composer knew the operetta seem even more unlikely. On the other hand, chances are far greater that someone at MGM lifted the operetta's rainbow ideas and gave them to Arlen and Harburg before they started Dorothy's Ballad. To backtrack a bit, by the time Arlen and Harburg's Oz contracts began in early May 1938, the movie's screenplay had already been revised by numerous writers, including Herman Mankiewicz and, a bit later, Noel Langley. Yet amidst all their extant scripts, up through the first few days of June 1938, there is no mention of a rainbow, not in their dialogue, nor in their scenic descriptions. Next up in Oz's long line of screenwriters, Florence Ryerson and Edgar Allan Wolfe, who as a team worked on the film from June 3rd to July 27, 1938. The New York native Wolfe had enjoyed a multifaceted Broadway career during the 1910s and 20s. Like Harburg, then, Wolfe might have run across the operetta somewhere along the line. But as for the most likely MGM link to the operetta, the real money is on Florence Ryerson. Born and raised in Southern California, Ryerson easily could have known this children's piece, particularly given her interest in fairy tale themes and domestic fiction. While a student at Pasadena High School, she wrote a fairy tale play entitled Juan of the Wood, a work later produced by the Los Angeles Children's Theater in 1911. Additionally, journalist Algene Harmitz notes that Ryerson, quote, was considered good at writing warm stories for women, end quote. It seems beyond coincidental that during Ryerson's early career, the operetta was quite popular in California, where it was staged at least 12 times between 1915 to 29, mostly in the Los Angeles area, well within Ryerson's orbit. Also pertinent, Ryerson and Wolf's draft Oz screenplays reveal a sweet, sentimental approach, far more in keeping with the operetta than Oz's earlier screenwriters. For instance, their contributions to Oz include softening what had thus far been a stern Aunt Em, adding the charlatan yet soft-hearted fortune-teller Professor Marvel, and ensuring no one would intentionally be killed in the picture. Moreover, during the first 2 weeks of June 1938, the period coinciding with the start of Ryerson and Wolf's assignment, the dramaturgical setup for Dorothy's Oz travels, as we know it today, rather suddenly begins to take shape. Again, a bit of backtracking. Within the surviving scripts before Ryerson and Wolf's arrival, the song spots for Dorothy's ballad are filled by what is called the Kansas Song, a number written by Roger Edens, the film's musical supervisor. Only the lyrics survive from Eden's Kansas Song, stanzas including frequent, direct quotations from Home Sweet Home, the famous 19th century parlor ballad. Significantly, though, Eden's Kansas number lacks any type of rhetorical device to propel Dorothy's Oz journey. Indeed, she sings about how much she loves home, not about leaving. And by April 1938, it was clear, especially to Oz's associate producer, Arthur Freed, that a ballad celebrating hearth and home was not going to work for Oz's prologue. In an April 25th memo, Freed articulated his wish that Dorothy's Kansas Song itself, rather than dialogue, should accomplish the driving force behind her Oz adventure. Freed's model was the opening number of Disney's Snow White, the hit movie of winter 1937-38. Quote, "The whole love story in Snow White is motivated by the song Someday My Prince Will Come, as Snow White is looking into the well. Dialogue could not have accomplished this half as well. I make this illustration for the purpose that we plant our Wizard of Oz book in a similar way through a musical sequence on the farm." End quote. To be sure, in the Disney scene to which Freed refers, Snow White sings a song into a wishing well, but it is not Someday My Prince Will Come, which occurs later. Rather, the introductory number at the well is entitled I'm Wishing, a sweet ballad, quote, "for the one I love to find me," end quote. Freed's minor mix-up is understandable. Both I'm Wishing and Someday My Prince Will Come are songs of romantic longing. By contrast, MGM's Dorothy would need to yearn for a utopian land. A dramatic trope of a different sort was needed, a decidedly non-romantic one. In retrospect, it seems if Freed had known the operetta, he would already have given its rainbow concepts to Roger Edens, or to one of Oz's early screenwriters like Mankiewicz or Langley. And if Harburg had suggested these ideas, he likely would already have done so near the beginning of his Oz assignment during May to accommodate Freed's late April request. But it is only after the arrival of Ryerson and Wolf, by the second week of June 1938, that various celestial images start to crop up among the extant Oz scripts, where Dorothy's song is newly outlined as a wanderlust ballad. Of particular interest are two Ryerson and Wolf screenplay portions, June 9 and 10, 1938, containing an essentially identical, highly descriptive song spot for Dorothy's number. In stark contrast to earlier scripts with references to Eden's Kansas Song, Ryerson and Wolf now clearly want to get Dorothy off the farm via some type of wish-related plot device. Ryerson and Wolf's comments suggest they're working with Harburg. By Harburg's own admission, in fact, he worked, quote, day after day, end quote, at Ryerson's house, contributing to and helping edit the screenplay. The June 9 song spot appears as follows. Dorothy. Oh dear, I wish I could go away. Hunk. Go away where? Dorothy. I don't know where, but I'm sure there's some place. There must be. Note, here is where we plan to cue in our number. As discussed yesterday, this will be a song in which Dorothy tells how she is sure there is a land somewhere, a place where everything is lovely, where everyone is happy, the most beautiful place in the world. Or perhaps it isn't in the world, perhaps it's in a star. In other words, when she sings this song now, she believes that this land is far away. But when she reprises on it in the Oz sequencing, she's learned that the land she's singing about is Kansas, the farm, home, which lends it pathos. The music is started by Hunk, who produces another harmonica, the one Aunt Em took away from him yesterday, and by Hickory, who uses his hammer, a piece of sandpaper, etc., on his metal contraption to get a novel musical effect. This, of course, leads into an orchestrated accompaniment. On the last lines of the second chorus we cut away to the roadway approaching the farm. These sentiments are rather close to those of Oz's final cut, aside from the farmhands listening and the harmonica and hammer toward the end, all holdovers from earlier scripts. Regardless, several specifics here clearly foreshadow Arlen and Harburg's ballad. Dorothy will convey her belief that there is a land somewhere, a comment anticipating "there's a land that I heard of," the third line for Over the Rainbow's chorus. And the star illusion later materializes in the ballad's bridge. "Someday I'll wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me." Also outlined here is a reprise of Dorothy's ballad while in Oz, where she now longs to get back to Kansas. This idea made it all the way to Oz's previews. A partial reprise was filmed of Dorothy singing inside the witch's castle, but was cut shortly before Oz's release. If the operetta's rainbow ideas had not already been introduced by this June 9 song spot, they were surely adopted within the next week. In a June 16th Ryerson and Wolfe fragment, the word rainbow first appears among the extant Oz scripts, in the team's description of Munchkinland. Quote, "Since the Foundation is a soda fountain, we can go hog wild on color. It plays streams of raspberry, lemon, strawberry, orange, and mint, all the colors of the rainbow." End quote. 2 days later, by a June 18th Ryerson and Wolfe portion, rainbow surfaces again in Munchkinland, in slight variation. Quote, "Feeding a little stream is an exquisite fountain with water of all colors of the rainbow." End quote. And by a July 28th Ryerson and Wolfe script, the team had devised the notion for a rainbow bridge, a later discarded idea likely borrowed from Act 1 of the operetta, in which the Rainbow Queen and her entourage make their entrance by crossing a rainbow. This July 28th script is mentioned by Arlen's biographer, Edward Jablonski, who writes, quote, "One of Ryerson and Wolfe's early script revisions had employed the device of a magic rainbow bridge. Obviously, the idea of a rainbow had been hovering around MGM. Harburg took it from there." End quote. Granted, Jablonski's chronology is slightly off here, as Ryerson and Wolfe's late July 1938 Rainbow Bridge script appeared roughly a month after Arlen and Harburg had submitted their ballad in June. Still, Jablonski plainly recognized that Oz's rainbow concepts had stemmed from a source other than Harburg. Let's fast forward now to the 1960s through the early 1980s. During these years, Harburg often described how he devised the ballad's three-word title and film's rainbow narrative concepts during his Oz assignment. But in light of the overwhelming evidence to the contrary, Harburg's remarks on the topic should be taken with considerable skepticism. And at this point, the following must be admitted. The gifted lyricist was also a gifted storyteller. As Jablonski diplomatically writes, quote, "Harburg often revealed a wily leprechaun's way with an anecdote, and rarely resisted the temptation to make a story more colorful, more mythical, so to speak." End quote. Not surprisingly, when discussing the origins of Over the Rainbow, Harburg frequently embellished and/or adjusted his narrative. For example, Harburg told author Max Wilk and others that there was no rainbow in Baum's book, again the 1900 novel on which the MGM film is based. Significantly, this is an accurate detail about Baum's 1900 Oz volume. But over the years, in public at least, Harburg never mentioned Polychrome, the rainbow fairy who prominently appears in 3 later books in Baum's Oz series and in one of Baum's non-Oz novels. Instead, Harburg often claimed he came up with the rainbow idea for Dorothy's ballad because it would be the only thing of color she would have seen in her otherwise colorless, arid Kansas. Additionally, in a mid-1970s interview with Algene Harmitz, Harburg stated, quote, "I thought that the rainbow could be a bridge from one place to another. A rainbow gave us a visual reason for going to a new land and a reason for changing to color." End quote. Was Harburg recalling here Tillotson's and later Ryerson and Wolfe's Rainbow Bridge? These comments also indicate that Harburg came up with an idea of using the rainbow as a reason to switch from sepia to color. This sounds convincing at first, But in truth, the sudden transition to Technicolor had already been planned in Mankiewicz's Rainbow Free script of March 1938, written well before Arlen and Harburg's MGM arrival. Also intriguing, in a 1964 TV interview with Walter Cronkite, Harburg mentioned that Arlen's music had been written, quote, before I had ever spoken of Rainbow, or before I had ever said anything about lyric, end quote. However, by his mid-1970s interview with Harmitz, Harburg stated that he had given Arlen a dummy title for the ballad, strongly implying he had done so before Arlen began composing. And this dummy title definitely included the word rainbow. Over the rainbow is where I want to be. These and other Harburg remarks on the topic will be further assessed in a different project I'm preparing, for it is not the intent here to discredit one of the 20th century's greatest lyricists. Instead, we might consider the motivation behind Harburg's accounts. Was Harburg trying to avoid potential legal entanglements? How could he really have given credit to Tillotson and Peace without tremendous repercussions? Actually, MGM Lowe's owned the song's copyright. Therefore, any legal issues might have been beyond Harburg's control. Additionally, he surely felt pressure to create an engaging story about the genesis of what had already become one of the most famous songs of the 20th century, due in large part to television. During the 1960s and 70s, MGM's Oz was broadcast yearly on Network US TV, becoming an annual tradition. In subsequent years, cable broadcasts, home video, streaming services, and so forth have secured the movie as a nostalgic cultural touchstone. But Oz's nostalgic reception has also led to considerable hagiography. Amidst such sentimentality, can we remain objective about the film's now iconic ballad and its probable borrowed elements? Or have rose-colored glasses and the quasi-sacred nature of the song's afterlife blinded us from newfound information? Certainly, the notion that Arlen and Harburg drew from a pre-existing entity in no way diminishes their gifts in writing Dorothy's Number, a topic requiring at least another presentation, especially given recent discoveries concerning the possible inspiration behind Arlen's music. For now, suffice it to say that the ballad's likely 1915 precedent explored here sparked the duo's creative brilliance, ultimately resulting in a miniature masterpiece. Thank you.